Good afternoon to all, but also good morning and good evening to many of us. It's our pleasure to welcome you to the ITM Alumni webinar organized in light of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. In this webinar, ITM MPH alumna and colleague Houssynatou Sy will talk about her trajectory as one of the many women contributing to research, academics, and science. The main aim of the ITM alumni webinars is to share research findings, expertise, and experiences on a specific international health topic within the ITM community of alumni, students, staff, partner institutions, and the wider global health community. I will now briefly explain some of the webinar practicalities. If you want to ask a question, you can use the Q&A option you will have below your screen. If you want to ask a question in live, you can also raise your hand during the Q&A session. The chat is being disabled for questions. Nevertheless, we will post already some of the main key questions raised during the webinars so that you could already reflect upon these questions for the Q&A moderated sessions. Questions will be moderated and only a select number of questions can be answered in live given the limited time. Unanswered questions cannot be answered individually afterwards, for which we apologize. At the end of this webinar, a short survey will be displayed and a browser window will open to give your feedback. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available afterwards on the ITM Alumni platform and ITM YouTube channel. Our today's moderator is Professor Karina Kielmann. She's a medical anthropologist with 20 years of experience in research, teaching, and developing capacity for social science research in international public health settings. She has long-term research experience in India and East Africa, and as of 2009 has contributed to and led health systems research projects in Southern Africa. As a professor working at a health and equity unit, her current research projects focus on investigating how health systems can become more responsive and accountable to individuals with HIV, TB, and drug-resistant TB. Karina, the floor is yours. Let me wait. You need to unmute the room. Yes.
Okay, sorry for that. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for the introduction, and welcome to the audience. I'm delighted to introduce my colleague and friend, Houssynatou Sy. She's currently a researcher in the Unit of Complexity and Health in the Department of Public Health. And I'll give you a short CV, but the whole purpose of this talk is really to illustrate that sometimes when we just look at a CV, a conventional CV, we kind of miss the trajectory in terms of what constitutes important decision-making points in someone's encounter or experience of science and scientific research. So Natou started her career actually in business engineering, interestingly enough, at the University Libre de Bruxelles. She then moved into development studies at the University of Antwerp. And following this first master's degree, she worked at ITM for quite some time as a research coordinator, and through that work was exposed to multiple EU-funded programs in several African countries, and through this gained a lot of exposure to biomedical and clinical research. She also gained experience in public health by managing programs which were intended to strengthen local health systems actors in DRC, Burkina Faso, and Benin. And finally, just 2 years ago, she got her master's in public health here at ITM, and her thesis focused on how external actors contribute to health system strengthening in fragile settings. And the research now, sort of currently and looking forward, and we'll hear a little bit more about that, is really about creating conditions for co-creation with vulnerable communities, such as internally displaced populations in urban areas that are affected by climate change and conflict. So just through that introduction, you can see that Natou has been involved in scientific research in different roles. And when she invited me to moderate her talk today, she said that it was important for her to not speak necessarily about a very specific episode of this career, but rather to say something about the fact that many of us, especially as women, occupy multiple different roles in science, and some of those roles are more visible than others. So her trajectory in science was punctuated by very specific moments in which her role, but also her relationship to scientific knowledge, as well as the subject or the object of scientific inquiry, were not necessarily fixed, but were open to question. And so I thought it would be really interesting to ask Natou about these moments, these kind of what I call moments of revelation that she had in her past 15, 20 years. As an anthropologist, I've conducted a lot of in-depth interviews, biographic interviews with people. And one of the things that we do when we feel that it's hard to sort of to ask people to talk about their careers or their life story is we ask them to bring, to comment on 5 objects that are important to them. You may also be familiar with a British, what do you call it, émission, a program on the radio called Desert Island Discs, where famous people like Natou, are asked to bring along 5 pieces of music that mean something to them. So we kind of adapted this method, right? So I've asked Natou to look at and to select 5 images that symbolically represent kind of moments of scientific revelation for her as a female scientist, but also as a scientist of Malian origin. So she's going to tell you about her journey in science through these images. And each of those images raises for both of us, I think, really important questions that we're going to encourage you to comment on while we move through this talk. So I'm going to invite Natou to start with your first image.
Thank you so much, Karina. Thank you so much for being here with me. And thank you also, Charlotte, for preparing this session together. Thank you all. We are almost 90 online, so I'm so happy to be here. I really hope we will have a nice discussion. But before starting, I would like to tell you an anecdote. At a certain moment, Charlotte called me and asked me, Natou, would you please like to share the webinar on women in science? And I was like, why me, Charlotte? Why? What can I say about women in science? I'm a junior scientist. I have a 1.5 year experience in science. But then, of course, I have almost 20 years of work experience, and thinking about it with friends and colleagues, we reflect on that as well. I was like, in fact, no, I'm in science for more than half of my career, contributing from different perspectives and also doing different things. And then I was thinking, okay, if I can speak about other kind of contribution and I can speak about my experience as a researcher now, and I guess you will be happy also to share yours, and then we can have a lively discussion on it. So that's the idea today. So let's jump to the first picture.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Hope that my slide are just following me on that. Okay. Yes. Okay, first picture. What do you see here? I know that you cannot answer to me, but in this picture, I can see 2 persons wearing protective gear, which will signal that they are in a very risky environment, so that for their health, but also maybe for other people's health. And it could be that these people are involved in care, or they are involved in research, they are manipulating biomedical material, as we can see, but they are doing or contributing in a certain way to scientific work. Now, this picture has been taken during the Ebola PX trial in Conakry in 2015. That trial was led by ITM in a consortium called the Ebola-TX Consortium. And a lot of people were involved in that, in that work. Many of them were doing men and women, so not only men, doing many tasks like planning, organizing, collecting data, disseminating results, doing the logistics, sending the money. Among them, I was one of the lucky ones to go also to Guinea for that trial. This photo was taken by the way, by ITM Communication Service, just to give them the credit. But when you see that, what do you imagine? Who do you see behind this mask? And how can we make sure that people that are here contributing to this very important science discovery for us at ITM, how can we make sure that they also are recognized? As you can see, it is not so easy, because one of the most important article publication that we got from this trial was this one that is you can see, and out of the 25 co-authors, you can see that there are 9 women, and you have also not a lot of Guinean, of African on that, but that doesn't mean that they were not acknowledged in another way. But the way we acknowledge and recognize in science, most of the time is through co-authorship in publication, and in that case, it is not acknowledging enough the work of the million, the thousands and millions of people contributing to science every day. So how can we change that? What can we do about it?
So it touches on such an important issue about really who contributes to science and how, and it's a discussion that I personally have also had in many fieldwork settings. It's often a really uncomfortable discussion because it kind of challenges the boundaries of gender, of professional capacity and knowledge, you know, who co-authors, who's the scientist, who's the researcher, who's the assistant, and so on. So one preliminary question that we had for the audience to reflect on as we move through the talk, and we can start thinking about these questions already, is what are the small steps that can be made towards recognizing imbalances in scientific research collaborations, not just in terms of gendered imbalances, but other kinds of imbalances that result from the different social identities that we carry as researchers and researched, as well as locals and internationals and so on. So I'll ask Natu now to, with that question on your minds, I'll ask her to move to her second image.
Yes, before moving to my second image, sorry, Karina, I just would like to highlight that many of the colleagues that are working, contributing to science in a non-scientific track, as they call that, many of them are women, and more than 60% of them are women. So I would like to give a kudos to them, because we have been working a lot together at ITM at least, and then today also this is an occasion for you guys, you girls, you ladies to intervene. So now let's go to the second picture, Karina. So this second picture, what you can see here clearly is a Fulani settlement. Maybe you don't know who are the Fulanis, but this is a tribe, an ethnic group, I would say, in West Africa, and I'm a part of that ethnic group. We are traveling through the Sahel, so you can find Fulani everywhere in the Sahel region in West Africa. But here we are in Mali, and Fulani mainly are nomadic people. So you have also sedentary Fulani, but now we are looking at the housing of Fulani population. So they move with the earth, and they, depending on the season, you will find them in a different part of the country. This picture was taken during my during one of the fieldwork that I did in Western Mali in 2010. And I met really by others, part of my family in that region. It was not the idea to see them. I was around, and then I met someone who directed me to them. And during the discussion that I had with, I stayed there a few days, and during one of these evening and long discussion that we had, because there were no TV, of course, we could discuss about the purpose of life, why we are doing what we are doing. And by discussing that, I start advocating for education for girls, for mental health. They should go to the health center. They should put the daughter to school. They should try to find a way to avoid poverty in a way that to avoid constraint due to their lifestyle. I was a bit lecturing them. And at a certain moment, the reaction I had, because I was discussing with one of my cousins, she looked at me and she said, if I would put my daughter to school and she would look like you, I prefer not. And I was like, why? And then she said, but because this is not the life you want to live. This is not how we see things. In fact, your relation to health, to education, to well-being, to the purpose of life, the way you want to deal with the constraint, this is really you framed in how you see your world. This is not how we see things, and this is not what we want to do. Then why this is so revelatory to me is that was my first research work as a student. And then I realized I had at that time a very quantitative way of seeing things, what I would say post-positivism a bit. And then I realized that in fact, I was in a kind of system of knowledge who is quite dominant in the world. And that I felt so comfortable in that one that I was going to explain to someone else that maybe this person could receive help from me, but looking at intervention that are really vested in my system of knowledge. And then she really bounced, I heard this post bounce to my face saying, Natou, in fact, no, I have another system of knowledge and you cannot help me if you don't understand that one. So this is a bit what I wanted to share with you. What is science, in fact? Are we talking about different system of knowledge? How can we help people when we don't share the same language? When we don't understand them? This is something I would like us to reflect upon Karina. And of course, we can see the picture of me being part of this family, having this nice evening chat. And also my question to you, is there one reality or is there different reality in different lengths? What is evidence? What is science?
So again, I mean, this point, I think when Natou and I were when I first looked at the image with her, I was also very curious about the story, not only because of this long lost family tie, but also the fact that, you know, the gulf between where she is now, where the young lady on the photograph is, and so on. And I was thinking about the often kind of simplistic distinction we make in the field between knowledge and belief, right? Us and them. Culture versus science, and instead, how as an anthropologist, but also as a public health scientist, how important it is really to get to the heart of what kind of knowledge matters to people who are dealing with different kinds of uncertainty or misfortune in their lives, and how some kinds of knowledge, which are not always scientific as defined by Western scientific standards, are superior to others in terms of being able to find a strategy or a solution for a specific problem. So our question to the audience, our second question, is really, is science something that always has to take place in a lab or a trial or a university? Or is science based in its most, kind of fundamental form? Is it about experimentation to see what works for people in given contexts? So I'm inviting Natou to move to her third image.
Yes. So this is the third image I would like to show you today. This is a very important turning point in my career, for sure. In fact, this is a piece of urban art that you can still find in a very poor neighborhood in the middle of Bamako, the capital city of Mali. It shows a person who is claiming, keep your money, I want change. And it looks more like a billboard, than really a graffiti, but this is a kind of really a statement that I've seen when I was going somewhere in the street. And then it has really inspired me because it was really picturing the tension we had in the country at that moment. So, picture taken then in 2019, just before the COVID, during a family visit with my family in Mali to visit my family also as well. And in fact, that happened in 2019. We were already 7 years into conflict in Mali, with a lot of external aid, with a lot of, I would say, donors and people intervening in how we should deal with our problem in the country. But also with the remaining conflict and political instability and poverty and poor health outcome and poor education. So a kind of frustration among young people, like we are receiving that money for such a long time and nothing is changing. We have people intervening to help us to fight. We have people intervening on help people intervene on education, creating a business, but still we are not seeing any change. Things are remaining the same. Then I realized that in fact, health and global health in general is very much influenced also by this very politicized nature of foreign aid. Foreign aid has conditionalities. Conditionalities are influencing politics. Politics are influencing our work as health professionals. And me, before that, I was working almost 4 years around West Africa and Congo as well, trying to solve health system issues. And then I realized that in fact, you cannot depoliticize. You cannot just not consider this whole political environment and geopolitical place. And I realized that also that we have to look at when we want to be working on interventions, on health intervention, we have to look at that we respect and we look at the sovereignty. We have to look at the scientific autonomy of people. We want to look at, we need to decolonize science, but from our perspective again. I'm not sure that we should be decolonized by people who colonize us. Now I'm speaking from my African point of view, of course. I think this is something who has to come from us, and it has to be, how can I say that, led by us. And just so as a Malian, I left Mali at that time with the idea that really I need to be more aware about this kind of place if I want to do something more than just strengthening the health system. So my question to you is, what do you think about that? And how do you think that we can still intervene when there are some political plays that we don't have any room of maneuver on? We think so, but at the same time, we see ourselves as a change activist, I would say, and how can we do change or foster change when we are doing our work as a public health professionals?
Thank you. I found this particular image quite powerful. It's not something that one comes across in every setting, but I think I have seen similar, especially in countries that are very contingent on donor funding. We've seen similar expressions of protests, which are really about what the funding brings with it. And I think just being conscious of the fact that much of our science is also contingent on that funding and what kinds of imperatives that brings along with it. So in our work kind of in global health, I think taking a stance that really seeks and respects people's quest for, as you say, sovereignty or decolonization in science may suggest quite a radical path in terms of how we do science. And I don't think we're anywhere near there yet. So for us, working in global health, the question might be, as you say, what means, the question in the audience too is, what means do you actually have? What means do we have in our work to foster social change over and beyond supporting health and health systems transformations? Or perhaps health systems transformations are already part of fostering social change, given that the social, that we think about health systems as social systems as well. So on to the next image, Natou.
Yes. So the next image, quite a funny one, no? Because it is really, I guess that people that are used to building works will be very surprised about what they see here, even if you are there from Europe. But I would like so what do you see first? Let's start by the beginning. You see here the water tower. which is made from wooden part found here and there, somewhere in West Africa. It looks like a piece of art, at least from my point of view. And this image was taken, in fact, in Niki Hospital, referral hospital in Benin in 2019. It was my last mission in Benin just before COVID, sorry. And in fact, I was in that hospital with my colleague of MSD, Médecins Sans Vacances, Mathieu Dossou, Dr. Mathieu. And Dr. Mathieu, at that time, we found ourselves in an hospital in September, post-rainy season, with the malaria season, I would say then, with many children and mothers in the hospital. A small hospital of 200 beds, we had more than 1,000 people around. I was so desperate. We were looking at all these mothers coming and seeing their children dying, and with very few medical professionals trying to save them, no blood, no medicine. And I was like, Mathieu, what are we doing here? What are we really doing here? What can we do? Every year there is a malaria season, every year people are dying, every year millions are invested in that thing. It's not functioning. What can we do here? And he looked at me and he said, Natu, do you know what? In fact, you are seeing what is not functioning. Even in that big misery, there is something. There are things that are changing over years, and I can see them, and I think we should learn, because this is our context. And he took this picture, and then he told me, look at this one. Would you build something like that in Europe? I was like, no, we won't. Because if I would show that to my husband, which is an architect, he would say, oh, this is so risky. This is not really solid enough. People will just die if they jump on that. They will never be able to build something with that scaffolding. And then I make me really realize that this very moment, that in fact, people dream about making a scaffolding. They find things that they have here and there. They make something with it. They build it. And at the end, it will be a water power. And we will be able to use it. And that makes me think that, in fact, there is no one way to strengthen system. There is no one way to improve health. There is no one way to cure a disease or to prevent a disease. There is many ways to do it. And to do that, we need to look at what we have in hand and what we can do with what we have right now. And from that perspective, then I also changed my way of seeing things. We were there with the external funded intervention that we were applying in every setting. And with Dr. Mathieu, we started looking at what is functioning in that specific setting of Niki. And when I went to learn public health, that is what also I try always to check. What can we do? Looking at the beyond the obvious gaps, what can we do? And what can we do to have intervention that fit to the context with what we have in hand at that moment? I give it up to you, Karina, to reflect on that.
So I also really like this image, because initially I looked at it and I thought, oh my goodness, I would hate to be, I'd hate to be working on this tower because I'd be terrified of falling down, right? But then I think you mentioned this, this idea of bricolage. And it's again a term that I'm very familiar with from my studies in anthropology. So there was a famous symbolic anthropologist called Claude Lévi-Strauss who talks about bricolage, and he talks about it in reference to the skill of using whatever is at hand and recombining it to make something new. And for me, it really has relevance for how we understand the relationship between theory and methods in scientific work. So sometimes we're so trained to only see what we expect to see, because that's what the theory tells us to look for, that we kind of miss the nuances, we miss the context within which we're working. And I think this holds really true for different kinds of science, whether it's lab work or it's a clinician who's making a diagnosis and only seeing what they were trained to see, or it's a public health researcher who's trying to evaluate why an intervention works or not. So in other words, the kind of sometimes the limits of the theoretical or the assumptions or the prerequisites that we have in terms of looking at looking at the reality that we're trying to uncover can be, can be restrictive, right? So our question for the audience on this one is where, how, and kind of at what levels does context model science, We talk about confounding, we talk about bias, we talk about noise, right? Whenever you have contextual factors. But actually, all those contextual factors are what help to enhance or enrich science, and they help explain why things happen in the ways they do. So that was our question for this image. And now on to your very last image.
Yes.
And I think this relates to your current research, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We are almost running out of time because I want to give you enough time, but I'm really happy to also be able to show this last one. This is a picture that I took in internally displaced settlement in the middle of Bamako, in Mali again. That was this year, last year in 2023. So this settlement is located next to a livestock market. And what you see here is food, leftover food and bread, which is on a bash on the ground to dry under the sun. That is in the sun. This is the idea. This is what you see. But then, when I took this picture, I was doing this exploratory visit for my research in Mali, and I was trying to understand what I was seeing there. So trying to interpret and to check with people. And to be honest, when I saw that, I was walking around in the street with someone else living on the side. And I asked my question in a quite a convinced way myself, like, what is that? Are you drawing food for animals? And the person replied to me, no. We are drawing that, and then after we will boil it, and then we'll serve it to families. And I was like, okay. Of course, you feel bad, but as a researcher, it was not only about feeling bad for these people, it's also about, if I would come here and I would not ask this question, I would go home with a completely other idea of what we should do here. So it was a kind of revelation to me also at that time that in fact, we really need to sit down to understand the needs of people, to analyze also from their perspective what they need before strategizing any kind of or designing any kind of intervention. But how do you do that in a setting where people have a survival needs? They need to eat, they need to sleep, they need to just be safe somewhere. How do you do that when they don't have time to sit with you and discuss about their needs? Should you do that, or should you do some humanitarian work to save their life right now? How do you do research and inclusive research in that kind of situation? That is a question still I'm trying to answer myself. So this is going to be, I think, the topic of my research for the next years, trying to understand how do you involve, how do you do inclusive involvement, not kind of tokenist participatory approaches, but really citizen science, co-creation, genuine participatory work with people that are really in need, that are vulnerable in a fragile setting where they are not safe and where they cannot really take, they don't have any power. How do you find structural power imbalance? How do you involve them in a way that they are safe, and how do you do that in an ethical way? So again, this is the question for you because I don't have the answer, but this is going to be what I will be doing in the next years, I hope. Why I'm presenting this picture to you, because all my thinking of the last 15 years in science have led me to that, in fact, to the fact that we need to work. I'm a scientific, I'm an activist in science, I would say. I want to do things to change things for people, but how do you influence these people? How do you take into account their perspective, their system of knowledge? How do you do that in a respectful way? Yeah, so maybe I will now give over to Karina and to you. And thank you so much already now for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion, recording discussions.
Natou, thank you so much. It's again such a powerful image, and again, I wasn't sure what I was seeing, and when you explained it to me, I was also kind of, you know, struck by it, and I was struck by my own kind of, how do you say, my conflicting feelings, right? Because on the one hand, it sort of provokes almost like a moral indignation or pity, right? Because you say, oh my God, how is this possible? This is food, you know, that has been used and reused, right? But at the same time, it kind of forces you to look at unexpected strategies again that are generated by people who are trying to get by in really, really difficult livelihood circumstances. So, like you say, I mean, if we're truly interested in being more inclusive in co-design or co-creation of interventions that work for people, we have to be more humble, but also more realistic in terms of what can be achieved, right? Because I think that's the crux of the question that you raise, which is we have all these buzzwords around co-design, around participatory, around action-oriented approaches to science and public health. But what does it take really? What does it take to start from a level that is a very different level of understanding of how you get by? So our last question for you is very much, you know, what kinds of evidence can or should inform global health interventions? How can you actually take global perspectives seriously? But conversely, how, you know, what are the limits really? So I think that ends our formal talk. I want to thank Natou, as I'm sure you all would like to as well, for this very interesting and really rich journey and images, which I hope have provoked some thoughts in the audience today. I certainly enjoyed, you know, supporting you in looking at these images and hearing the stories behind them, because as those of you who know Natou, if she starts telling a story, it can go on for a very long time, which is absolutely brilliant. So I'm looking forward to more stories in science and outside of science. And over to you for basically to the audience to have a look at our questions again. And we'd like to open the discussion really to comment on one or more or any of your own experiences that might resonate with Natou today.
If I understood, you can raise your hand and Charlotte will let you in and let you speak, or you can ask questions via the Q&A. I'm so looking forward to your questions and your answers, certainly.
I indeed see questions in the Q&A, and there is also Eric Florence who raised his hand. So
okay, should we take, maybe we'll take one question from the online questions and one online. So the question from Elizabeth Irungu is, what has been Zaal's greatest, Zaal, okay, that's here, the Zaal. What has been Natou's greatest motivation to not give up on a scientific career, especially considering gender roles in many African societies?
Yes, this is quite an interesting one, because in fact, really the features of, when I look at my female scientists here at ITM the women I met here that are senior scientists like Karina and others, they are very, very, very strong women. And sometimes I'm like, why do we need to be strong women to do science? You know, at the end, because it's so difficult to navigate, you have to be strong. If you need to show that you are strong, even if you are not. And it's not a difficult, that's why also I like this image of bricolage, because you find your way. I remember when I started at ITM, I was coordinating research, and I had a lot of, I was lucky to have project PIs that really recognized directly that I was interested by the content and not only by the coordination. And through my career at ITM, many times I was confronted with the fact that I had no medical background. So how can I do research if I have no medical background? And it was, I'm quite a stubborn person. So I wanted to contribute to science in a way that my contribution can be useful. It can be via coordination or via research, But I didn't want to be limited by anyone. I wanted to be the only one to decide what I could do in my scientific journey. So I decided to go and to go to the field to understand why I need to do science first and what I want to do in science. And when I came back, as I said, I joined the MPH. And after the MPH, I started a career as a researcher, which I would never think some years ago, because I was thinking this is not for me. I need action. I need to do things right now to have a result right now. But that, as I said, sometimes you realize that you need to pass by research, because research is important as well to identify the need of people in an inclusive way, of course. So to reply to your question, I don't have a kind of recipe because my own career was a bricolage. I think that many people play at a certain moment a role on that. The fact that I'm also very stubborn has helped also to keep focus on what I want for myself. But what I can say that I think is if you identify the constraints that are around you and you don't let people put the limits on you, it'll be a bit easier to just try to find a way in a structure which is not helping you too much. But I cannot really, I mean, I have to be humble. I mean, I'm just starting my career in research. But I think through my experience in science, I can say that it's not easy, but women are doing much more difficult things in life. But that's not related to science. So you have to be confident.
Thank you so much for that answer. I'm going to ask Charlotte to invite one of the people who has raised their hand to speak first, and then come back to Joris, who's also got a question.
Yeah, I just see that the raise the hands from Eric Florence is gone. So I don't know whether other participants would like to say something in live or comment or respond to a question. Otherwise, I would propose to take the questions in the Q&A box.
Charlotte, sorry, I know that there are some Francophone people online that will not dare to speak up in English. If they want to, they can, maybe I can translate.
Of course.
Thank you. Sorry, Karina.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Joris, do you want to answer, I mean, do you want to ask the question live? I'm not sure how to do that, Charlotte, sorry, is there something I need to do? So Joris's question is an underlying question to all of these formulated questions that we have on the screen, which is, are we as public health researchers allowed to make mistakes and to not know?
Is it a question for me, Joris? I hope so. I hope you are allowed to make mistake and not know. I think Joris is my colleague, so he passed by my office every day before going to his office. And I think that you saw on my office that it is okay not to be okay. It is okay not to be right all the time. I guess that you are a more experienced scientist than me, Joris, but I think that we learn from our mistakes. And this is how I did, at least, and how I see also what we do. This learning, like the image in Benin, with this water tower, yeah, you have constraint, you try, it is not working, you do more, you try something else. And I don't believe in anything which is directly right, and no, with no mistake. I don't think this is possible. So yes, my reply to your question will be, I hope we can make mistake and we can learn from it.
But I was going to say something else to yours. I think what's interesting is thinking about, the hierarchy of science and where public health is placed in relation to clinical medicine and in relation to lab sciences and so on. So I do think that the sort of higher you go up in the hierarchy in terms of, trying to filter out the contextual influence, the more subject you are to being called on your mistake, on your so-called mistake, right? Because if you acknowledge the context is going to, if the context evolves, there's a dynamic shifting of what happens, then it's more acceptable to say, to not talk about mistakes, or to say, one knowledge is the right knowledge. Whereas as soon as you move into something that is so dictated by a fixed theory, it's much more difficult to come up with the so-called the wrong result or whatever.
Yeah.
And another question, have you ever felt like you wanted to change a lot of things in your own country, but everyone around you, especially your own people, didn't really want things to change? If that's the case, how did you feel about it and what did you do about it?
This is a good question, because this is a bit how things are going in my own country now, that I don't share always the public opinion. But again, I always try to think about for who we need to change things. Like, remember again this story about from the disabled community that don't do nothing for me without me. Yeah, if you think that you should change things and then people do not agree to change it, then you have a problem somewhere. I mean, this is all about understanding what do you want to change and for whom, and is that really necessary for these people? This is also again about now I'm trying to reply to another question at the same time from Bushra, who said, I think science must be neutral, honest, and strong. This is a very strong statement. I thought that as well before. And I think neutral is a very strong word. I don't think there is any neutrality in science. But honest and strong, I think this is the case, depending on how you are transparent in the way you do science and how you make clear what you're doing and how you do it. But yes, I can understand that within a kind of paradigm that this is true, but true is diverse also, and it is superlative. So I don't really, I agree that you can think that, but this is clearly not how I think. Do you think a woman can be an advantage in science today? Of course, I think that almost agree. I think that for sure, because now I'm going to do some kind of generalization that I should not do, but I deeply believe, because I'm an Afro feminist and an Afro optimist. You will ask me what that means, but that means for me that I'm clearly sure that the way we struggle in life to find our way and the capacity that we build by doing so make us adaptive, creative, flexible, and strong enough to be an advantage for science today. I hope this replies to your question.
So we've got another question from Matthew. Women's ability to adapt is enormous and exceptional. What do you think of the possibilities of managing our companies?
What do you mean, Mathieu? Do you mean managing our organizations? Maybe, Mathieu, if I may translate, I mean, give an interpretation on what you are saying. Yeah, I think women are super managers because we are, most of us who are mothers, or maybe not mothers as well. As a mother, I can tell you, I'm managing many things at the same time, different jobs, and at different moments. One night shift, a morning shift, afternoon shift, a work where you need to be 100% at your top. So nobody is looking at your family as an excuse. At the same time, you want to be a nice friend, a nice daughter, a nice mother, a nice wife. There are many expectations that we have to deal with. At the same time, you have to be too strong enough also to prioritize what are the best things for us to do. Yeah. So, Mathieu, I think if you would have a woman managing your organization, then you are lucky if she is capable to do it. But I'm not saying now that you have to take any woman because she's a woman. Of course, you understand me, Mathieu.
Any other questions from anyone online, or I think, sorry, you're all online, but anybody who wants to ask a question live in English ou en français aussi?
Yeah.
On peut faire tout parce qu'on est des femmes multilingues.
That's also right. I think I still have Ikram Alesh here, congratulating for the great experience and the challenges overcome. I think if we would, our colleagues here online would like to contribute, I'm sure you will hear about a lot of interesting stories and more interesting than what I've been telling you today. So it is just one of the experience of how to contribute to science in a way that the life gives you also the possibility to do it. But there are many of it, and we should dare sharing them and to inspire the next generation of women. It should not put this pressure on them to go to STEM, to study mathematics and to do biomedical science because this is the only way to science. No, I don't think so. I think we should encourage girls and women in general to contribute the way they think they should and they value to science, also taking their perspective of science into account.
I see that there is also Marie Medek, so who raised her hand, so I will allow her to talk.
Okay, je pense que I hope you can hear me. Natou, talk?
On t'entend super bien, Marie. We
Okay,
hear you
cool.
very well.
I can do it in French, so I'll do it. Merci beaucoup, Natou. Je me demandais si tu avais des modèles de rôle ou des femmes dans le monde de la science qui t'inspirent, en fait, que tu pourrais partager avec nous.
Ah là là.
Il y en a beaucoup, mais juste quelques-unes.
Maria, comment on appelle ça? Tu me pousses là. Je vais devoir choisir.
Désolée.
C'est pas facile de choisir parce que, en fait, d'abord, j'aimerais éviter d'aller parler des gens qu'on ne connaît pas. Parce qu'en général, les rôles modèles qu'on a, c'est des gens sur lesquels on a inventé une histoire. And we are supposed, we have only one side of the story, you know, the story which is published and what they want us to know. I prefer to speak about women that I know, that are evolving in science, that I really appreciate, and women that I've been working with as well. But I can say, okay, this is a woman in science. I've been working with this person, and I find this woman is doing a great job. And there are many of them around us at ITM. Now I'm going to take the risk to name some of them and not name all the others, which is not easy as well. But I like also the idea just to taking one on each department that I've been working with at ITM, that I really appreciate also people that are outside of ITM. Outside of ITM, I would say that I like very much working with Josephine Van Olmen. I really like the way she's taking the perspective of different people when working on a specific topic, very open as well. I like also working very much with Bauke from the biomedical department, because also again this capacity to look at science in a positive way and to take people together with her to encourage all kinds of contributions as well. I have been working also not very closely, but as a scientist, but as a support. I have been working with Judith Lena. Now I'm not going to speak about it because she's a director. I just want to speak about her because she has been, she inspired me in a way that she really dealing with a big scientific team and consortia, that she was able to get the better of each of the people around, also at the level of her department. These are in our department, of course, you have Saharan Bell, you have Lenka, I have here Karina next to me. I mean, these are all people that I can see that are doing science in the way that I hope one day I will be able to do the same. And people that are also contributing to science. Now, looking at the contribution to science now, we have also great colleagues on the other side, the people that are contributing to science but are never publishing because they are not researchers. And there you have also people at ITM that I appreciate very much, like Renilde, working, contributing to science for a long time. People at education service, Linda, Marianne, forming and helping to train the scientists for ITM for a long time already. I'm looking at people also at the logistic department that are sending shipment every time in Congo and in different place, contributing also people from the clinical department as well. So this is a bit what I can tell you.
Just to show you that there's a couple more questions from Zari. How can researchers ensure that their research results are adopted into policy, especially when they conflict with the current administration approach? And then there's another question, I'm just going to tell you the second one, which is out of these 5 images is the one that's most shaped your current perspectives in research, and how?
Maybe I will start with that.
Yeah, sure.
What shaped my perspective the most is really the discussion with my Fulani family in the middle of Western Mali. That really, for me, what I didn't tell, that I came there with a research, a quantitative research question at that time. I wanted to know why remittances were not creating development in that region, because it was a high, it was a source of migration to France. But at the end, I ended up with a qualitative study showing power imbalance, power play due to decentralization and multiple institutional reforms. So I realized that, in fact, contrary to what one of the participants said, that science is not always, it's not universal. I mean, we have there are some principles that apply everywhere, but many of the principles are just the context dependent and also people perspective dependent. And I try to remember that any time that I come up with a kind of certitude or something that I think is like that, then in fact it can look for alternative explanation and look for alternative perspective on the same phenomenon. So this is what influenced me the most, I think.
I think we're running out of time. Maybe just one more question, so you can choose. You've got a question which is about how can you ensure that results get adopted into policy, especially if they conflict with the kind of status quo. And the other question is around knowing that, you know, women are strong, they excel under hardships of being women, etc. But do we always have to do that? Do we always have to be strong? Or is there anywhere to change the rules and tailor them a bit more to our circumstances?
I'm really convinced that we don't have to be strong, but we have to be. I think I'm trying to make people accept that I don't need to be strong. I can speak only for myself in that case, of course. I don't need to be strong, and I think you don't need to be strong to do what you need to do. But of course, that means that people expect you to do so, and at a certain moment, we have to fight against this kind of expectations. And yeah, this is I'm struggling myself, Siku. So I don't have any asking that. I don't have any reply to that. I guess when I will be 80, if I have the chance to be 80 one day, I will look at you and I will say, my dear Siku, in fact, we need to be strong, but not in fact, I don't think we need to be strong. But this is also a change in attitude and perception. And this is also our role to change that so that our daughters and their daughters will be evolving in life where they don't have to be strong. And now replying to Ismail's question. Ismail, yeah, if I reply to that question, I think you will hire me, no? Ismail is asking this question. Zari first. Yeah, because Ismail was asking about how to make sure that policy are.
No, that's Zari.
It is Zari, okay. Zari, this is a very difficult question. I thought Ismail would reply to that question in fact because he's working on knowledge brokering and knowledge translation. But yeah, I hope that if we can involve people, that's the whole idea of co-creation. If we can involve people since the very first beginning, if it is possible to do so, that we have a higher chance that policy will be integrated evidence created by research. But this is really something that we need to research on, and people are already researching on, but specifically on fragile setting, this is something we still need to check, because this is an assumption that we make, the hypothesis that we need to reflect on it. Is it possible? What are the minimum conditions for that? Can we really involve, and is that really the condition for all policy translation, knowledge translation to the policy? Is it that is the one fit kind of framework that we have to use for that? So I don't know. I think Snail can maybe answer to that question. Snail had a question as well.
No, we've answered that already.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're just running out of time. We've got people congratulating you and saying how proud they are of you, which is lovely. Well, I am. So sweet. I think being okay, we've just been kicked out.
No, that's it.
Okay, I think we hand it back over to you, Charlotte.
Before maybe I can say thanks to all of you before getting back to Charlotte. Thank you so much for being here. We have been a lot online, and I'm so happy that we could share this discussion. And I'm really also very humble saying that you guys have many more things to say that I could say today. But thank you so much for attending, and I see you around for sure, many of you.
Thank you for allowing me to moderate.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Charlotte.
Charlotte, I think over to you, last thing, and I think we can close, right?
Exactly. Now it's up to me to say a big thank you to you, Natou, to Karina as well. I know for sharing your personal trajectory as well. It's not always that easy. So thank you very much for allowing us, also the audience, to have this insights in your professional trajectory. Thank you for the audience also for attending. We would just like to ask you to complete the polling as well, enabling us to follow up on the next webinars. I would like to also ask you already to save the date for the next upcoming webinar, which will be with Bushra Asarak, which will be organized on the 12th of March in light of International Women's Day. So save the date already. It will be in the afternoon from 2 till 3, and the communication will follow. So keep a close eye on it and stay tuned. So thank you once more to Natou and to Karina for this interactive Q&A, and to the audience for attending. So in the meantime, stay safe, healthy, and looking forward to the next webinar. Bye-bye. Thank you.